y vamos a comenzar el capítulo número 2 y la semana número 3. Okay? We're going to start with week 3 and chapter 2. Entonces, abran el libro en la página 60. La página 60. I'm not sure if I told you this, you probably have figured it out already, that here in My Spanish Lab, this is where you find your e-text. Up here, you click on it and you can look at your e-text. And this is where you will have you will find some of the vocabulary highlighted, and that means that you can click on it and hear the pronunciation of the words, which is a very good resource to have. Okay? Muy bien, el capítulo número 2, la vida universitaria. La vida universitaria, and this you should identify with a lot of what we're going to see here in this chapter because you are college students, okay? So we're going to be talking about college and classes and different classrooms and different activities that you do, okay? Here in the first page you have La Universidad de Guanajuato in Mexico. It's one of the oldest ones, really beautiful. I haven't been there, but I would like to. But it's a very old building, very beautiful building, huge. So we're going to go ahead and start. We're going to look at what we're going to be learning in this chapter, the objectives. I don't really know how to scroll this. Okay, objetivos y contenido. Okay, we're going to learn to share information about courses and majors, to indicate, we're going to work on the stress in the words, the accents, describe classroom and classmates, relate daily activities, create and answer questions, and numbers from 100 to 1,000. Let's see, elaborate on university places and objects, express the verb to be, but we're going to learn the other verb that also is used to express to be, to articulate emotions and states of being, convey likes and dislikes. We already learned a little bit of how to say that in the first chapter. Offer opinions on sports and pastimes, and that's where we're going to stop because we're going to do a little bit of culture as well. Okay, so school subjects and majors, the classroom, that we're going to get into the present tense of regular verbs. We're going to learn how to make questions, how to form questions. We're going to talk about academic life, the verb estar. We already learned the verb ser. Estar also means to be, but we're going to learn when we use estar and when we use ser. We're going to talk about emotions and states, and we're going to go back to the verb gustar, to like. You already learned how to say me gusta, no me gusta. Sí, muy bien. Okay, so let's go a la página 62. 62. We usually start, as you have figured out already, with vocabulary in the section called comunicación. Comunicación 1. Okay, make this a little bit smaller. Muy bien, entonces tenemos aquí las materias y las especialidades. Las materias y las especialidades. Courses, materias can also mean subjects or courses that you take. And majors, las especialidades. And so here you have different majors and classes that you can take at school. La arquitectura, el arte, la biología, and most of these are cognates. El derecho means law school. Los idiomas, foreign languages, and that is another word that ends in MA, and that comes from the Greek language. Okay, so you learned problema, what else? Drama, and another word that ends in MA and it comes from the Greek is idioma. Idioma. El idioma, okay? One language is el idioma, okay? It ends in MA, but it is masculine. ¿Sí? Muy bien. Okay, los idiomas, foreign languages, las matemáticas, la informática, computer science, la literatura, la medicina, la música, la psicología. The first P is not pronounced, okay? Just like in English, you say psychology, and you don't pronounce a P. The same thing in Spanish, psicología, okay? Muy bien. Entonces, you can click here.
La arquitectura.
And here, how they're pronounced.
El arte.
Muy bien. El arte, la biología.
La biología.
Muy bien. Okay, so work on the vocabulary some. Here you have other words. La administración de empresas, business. El curso, la pedagogía. El periodismo, el semestre. Okay? So you can be thinking about what your major is and find the word that identifies your major and what words you can use to talk about what you are studying. Muy bien, vamos a la página 63. En la página 63, all you're going to do today is mainly work with vocabulary and familiarize yourself with vocabulary, okay? Tomorrow we're going to get more into verbs, but today you have to practice with this new vocabulary that you're learning, and a lot of them, like I said before, are cognates, so it shouldn't be too complicated, okay? Muy bien. Here you have a word, administración. Remember that anything that ends with ción, with a C or with an S, is feminine, so you have la administración de empresas. Muy bien. You are going to be doing an activity in my Spanish lab with word stress and accent marks. Okay? So it's not here in the book, it's not explained here in the book, but it will be in your activity. See? Okay? You are also going to read about las universidades hispanas. The education system in Latin America is very different, especially in universities. Students who enter college start taking subjects from their major starting from the very first day, the very first semester. There is no such thing as taking general education classes. Like, you have to take science, or you have to take foreign language, and you have to take art, or, different things like that. And the reason is that most students, when they're in high school, and even elementary school, middle school, high school, they do take those subjects outside of school. In school, you do have like PE, but it's 45 minutes of just doing some physical activity. But schools don't focus on sports, specific sports, and much less in competition. They are very focused on academics, okay? Like, your, not English, but Spanish literature, math, and science. But most kids attend other schools outside of school, like art school. If you want to learn to play an instrument, you go to a music school. If you want to learn a foreign language, you go to a language school. If you want to play a sport, you join a sports club, and you play the sport that you like. So most kids do that. Like pretty much everybody does that. So you do get education other than the education that you get at school. The schools focus more on the academics than the extracurricular, and so do universities. Okay, if you want to do extracurricular things, you do that on your own, and most people do. It's a very common thing to do that outside of school. Okay, so you're going to read some about las universidades hispanas and do a little activity in my Spanish lab. Okay, so more vocabulary for today. La sala de clase, the classroom. This is vocabulary to describe your classroom and also the classmates. ¿Sí? Entonces tenemos el profesor, and if it's a woman, it would be la profesora, la pizarra, la tiza. Tiza is chalk, okay? I don't know how many schools still have chalk, but that's what it means. La tiza, la silla, el borrador. Borrar means to erase. So this is el borrador. El cuaderno, the notebook. El escritorio, the desk. La mochila, el lápiz. El estudiante, or I mean la estudiante, it's a girl. La estudiante, and if it's a guy, it's el estudiante. The word doesn't change, it's the same one. El bolígrafo, la pared, the wall, la ventana, el libro, el mapa. There you have another word that ends in a, but it's masculine, so that's another exception. El mapa, okay? It's not la mapa, it's el mapa. Y la mesa y la puerta. Okay, and I think you have a little bit more here. Otras palabras, los apuntes, la compañera de clase, el compañero de clase, la composición, another word that ends in ción, and it's la, el examen, el papel, la profesora y la tarea. Okay, so this is all vocabulary. Okay, so you're going to work with that for today. En la página 66, you also have activities that you're going to do in My Spanish Lab. And don't discard everything you learned in the previous 2 chapters, because everything is coming back, okay? The verb tener, you have an activity that you're probably going to do in, yes, you're going to do in My Spanish Lab. With the verb tener, okay, the verb ser is going to be used all the time. So don't just discard everything and forget about what you learned, because everything comes back. Okay, it's like putting together a puzzle. Everything has to do with everything. Okay, some vocabulario útil, useful vocabulary. To describe the classroom, you usually say, well, there are 30 desks and there is a whiteboard. Okay, to express the idea of, there is and there are, we use this little bitty word here, I. The H is not pronounced. I. And I means both there is and there are. So in English, you have 2 ways of saying it, depending on whether it's plural or singular. In Spanish, you use I, and it doesn't matter if it's singular or plural. You're going to use the same word. For example, you're going to say, hay 25 mochilas, that's plural, y 3 ventanas. But if you were saying there is one table, you would say hay una mesa. So it doesn't matter if it's singular or plural, you're always going to say I, and I means there is or there are. Okay? Muy bien. Entonces, en la página 67, do we have anything here? Well, this is another activity that I think you're going to do in my Spanish Lab. And tomorrow, mañana, vamos a estudiar el presente de verbos regulares. Okay, so starting tomorrow, learn your vocabulary, practice with your vocabulary, and then tomorrow we're going to get into the present tense of regular verbs to talk about daily activities. Okay, this is the name of the tense. Presente indicativo, okay, of regular verbs. We also, just like in English, we have regular and irregular verbs. But we're going to be working with regular verbs. Okay? Muy bien, entonces hasta mañana. Chao. And yesterday you started with the new chapter, Capitulo 2, and we're talking about la vida universitaria. We're learning how to talk about courses and majors and describing classroom and classmates, and mainly just vocabulary yesterday. Okay, so I hope that you got a really good practice with vocabulary, because we need the vocabulary to be able to form sentences. And today in the schedule it looks like a very light day because we only have to cover the present tense of regular verbs. But in fact, I put that one topic there by itself because it is extremely important that you make sure that you grasp the concept of how to conjugate verbs. This is where it starts getting complex, because we are going to start adding a lot of verbs at a time, and you need to know how to work with verbs. Okay, verbs are like the heart of the sentence, the words that express action. So if you don't get them right, you could be saying something different, something that you didn't really mean to say. Okay, so you need to really understand how to use, and we are going to start with the present indicative. It's called presente indicativo de verbos regulares. In Spanish, just like in English, we have regular verbs and irregular verbs. I'm going to explain you in a second what regular means, okay? So, el presente indicativo de verbos regulares. And before we go here, I'm going to share with you something else because this doesn't really offer a very good explanation. El presente indicativo. So in Spanish, we have verbs in the infinitive form, just like in Spanish, in English, excuse me, your infinitives are formed with the verb to have, to be, to go, to eat, to sleep, to run. Okay, you form the infinitives with two words. In Spanish, infinitives are of three kinds. Okay, infinitives can end in ar, in er, or in ir. Okay, so we have three kinds of infinitives. These are verbs that have not been conjugated yet. Okay, if they are the equivalent of to study, to eat, to live. Okay, so ar, and ir. Estudiar, comer, and vivir. Okay, regular verbs are those verbs that do not change the root. This is a root. The white part is a root. The colored part is the ending. Okay, so this is a root, this is the ending, this is a root, this is the ending. Regular verbs don't change the root when they conjugate. They change the endings for each of the persons, and all regular verbs conjugate the same way. All regular verbs that end in ar are going to conjugate the same way. All regular verbs that end in er are going to conjugate the same way, and the same with verbs that end in ir. So for example, for all the verbs that end in ar and are regular, okay, estudiar, hablar, cantar, bailar, all of them that end in ar and are regular, they're going to be conjugated like this. Each person has a different ending, but notice that all the roots are the same. They don't change, okay? Yo estudio, tú estudias, when you're talking to somebody in the second person. Él, ella o usted estudia. Nosotros o nosotras estudiamos. Ellos, ellas, ustedes estudian. Okay? So remember that you're not always going to have just the pronouns in a sentence. You could have, instead of él, ella, you could have a name. You can say María estudia. Jorge estudia. El profesor Gómez estudia. Okay? For nosotros and nosotras, you could say something like mi mamá y yo. That would be nosotros, right? It would be we. Mi mamá y yo estudiamos. O mi amiga y yo estudiamos. Okay? And ellos, ellas could be something like Juan, Pedro y José. That would be they, right? Juan, Pedro y José estudian. Or it could be mis hermanos estudian, right? Or it could be referring to the plural in the second person. You all, right? Tú y tu hermana estudian. Okay? So remember that it's not always about the pronouns. It could be names as well. Okay? Okay, so all of the verbs that end in ad and are regular conjugate like this. For yo, you drop the ending and add o, estudio. For tú, drop the ending and add as, tú estudias. For él, ella, usted, drop the ending and replace it with a, and so on. Okay? Now, verbs that are regular and end in are going to conjugate like this. Yo como, drop the ending and replace it with o for yo. Yo como. Tú comes, instead of as is going to be es. Tú comes. Él, ella, usted come. Here with adverbs is a, and here is come. Nosotros, nosotras comemos. Y ellos, ellas, ustedes comen. Okay, all verbs that are regular and end in conjugate like this. And for ir, yo vivo, drop the ending and replace it with the other endings. Yo vivo, tú vives, él, ella, usted vive, nosotros, nosotras vivimos, ellos, ellas, ustedes viven. Okay, so you have to learn the endings for the regular verbs because there are a lot of adverbs, not as many as there are, and just a few ir verbs, but you need to know them, okay? You need to know the endings of these verbs because we use verbs all the time. Okay, so let me go back to the book. Okay, vamos a la página 68 first. And here's an explanation of what I just told you. And here are some more verbs in ar. Verbos que terminan en ar, just like the ones we saw in that presentation. Comprar, contestar, enseñar, esperar, estudiar, hablar, llegar, necesitar, preguntar, preparar, regresar, terminar, tomar, trabajar, usar. So if you learn to conjugate one verb that ends in ar and it's regular, you know how to conjugate all of these, okay? So look at how common these verbs are. That's why it's so important that you learn to use them correctly and that you learn to conjugate them, okay? So down here you have the conjugation again of verbs that end in ar. Hablo, hablas, habla, habla, hablamos, habláis, hablan, hablan. So if you know how to conjugate hablar, you know how to conjugate all of these because they're all going to have the same endings, okay? Okay, so it's going to be yo compro, tú compras, él compra, o ella o usted compra, nosotros compramos, vosotros compráis, ustedes compran, etc. Okay? So contestar the same way. Contestar is going to conjugate the same way as hablar. Okay? Okay, the same way with Here we have some more verbs that end in Aprender, comer, comprender, correr, creer, y leer. So if you know how to conjugate comer, yo como, tú comes, él come, él, ella, usted come, nosotros, nosotras comemos. If you know how to conjugate comer, you know how to conjugate all of these. Okay? And the same with ir. Okay? Abrir, escribir, recibir, vivir. If you know how to conjugate vivir, you know how to conjugate all of them. Okay? Yo recibo, tú recibes, él recibe, nosotros recibimos, vosotros recibís, ustedes reciben, ellos reciben. Okay? The same way. Okay? So, it's very important that you get a lot of practice with this because it's going to get more and more complex each time because we're going to be introducing a lot of verbs at a time, okay? Okay, so let's go back to the previous page, página 67. We use the verb, the indicative, the present indicative, el presente, to talk about daily activities, to talk about routine, and we also talk about, we also use it to talk about the future sometimes, okay? For example, we can say, see, there's an example here, next page. Mario lee en la biblioteca. Mario reads in the library, or it could also mean Mario is reading in the library right now. Or Mario lee en la biblioteca mañana. Mario will read in the library tomorrow. Okay? Or we can talk about, for example, the bus arrives tomorrow at 10. El autobús llega mañana a las 10. Okay? Sometimes we use the present indicative to talk about future. Okay, so let's go back here. So here is Mario. Mario es un estudiante de Derecho. ¿Qué hace todos los días? So this is a very important question right here. ¿Qué hace? What do you do? Or what does he do? ¿Qué hace? The verb hacer. What does he do todos los días? ¿Qué hace todos los días? So when we answer that question, we are not going to repeat the word hace. We're going to replace hace with what he actually does, right? Just like in English, you don't repeat the word do when you're answering the question, what does he do? You say, well, he reads, he talks, he studies, okay? So, ¿qué hace todos los días? Bueno, llega a la clase a las 9 de la mañana. ¿Qué hace todos los días? Lee en la biblioteca. So, Mario would be the equivalent of the pronoun él, right? So you have to think about what pronoun you need to use to conjugate the verb. So Mario would be él. Él llega a la clase a las 9 de la mañana. ¿Qué hace Mario todos los días? Mario, o él, lee en la biblioteca. Mario, o él, habla con sus compañeros. Él trabaja 2 horas como tutor. Él come en la cafetería con amigos. A las 6:30 espera el autobús y regresa a su apartamento. Okay? So see all the verbs. This is an odd verb, and that's an odd verb, are and are. Okay, so they're all conjugated the same way. Llega, habla, espera, regresa y trabaja. And these two are verbs, leer and comer. They're conjugated the same way. Lee en la biblioteca, come en la cafetería con amigos. Okay, so please pay attention to the verbs. Okay, read this section very carefully and do the activities. You do not have a whole lot of activities, but the ones that you have, make the most of them, and look at the tutorials if you need to, the extra additional practice if you need to, because this is extremely important that you get a really good foundation in conjugating verbs, okay? Because this is just the beginning of more complex structures as we advance in the course. To start with how to form questions with question words, okay? Palabras interrogativas like what, where, how, who, when, and all those, okay? Muy bien, so please practice a lot, as much as you can, with the verbs, with the present tense, and tomorrow we're going to continue with verbs, plus we're going to learn how to form questions, okay? Muy bien, hasta mañana. We are going to continue today with creating and answering questions, and they all have to do with also how to use those verbs correctly, okay? So keep practicing with verbs, and we are going to start looking at how we make questions, okay? La formación de preguntas y las palabras interrogativas, creating and answering, okay? So to ask yes or no questions, questions that the answer is either yes or no, okay? We don't use auxiliaries like we do in English, okay? Like the do or did, okay? For questions whose answer is yes or no, okay? It's very simple. You can do it in 2 different ways, okay? This is the most common, the first one, adding question marks to a statement. For example, you have the statement, Antonio habla español. Antonio speaks Spanish. All you have to do is add the question marks at the beginning and at the end, okay? In Spanish, we have the question mark upside down at the beginning. And if you put the question marks in the statement, you are making that a question, okay? So this means, does Antonio speak Spanish? Or Antonio speaks Spanish. Antonio habla español, okay? The statement, Antonio habla español. Antonio habla español, okay? So very easy. All you have to do is ask the question marks, all right? As in English, your voice goes up at the end of the sentence. That's how somebody knows that you're asking a question, okay? Another way you can ask a question whose answer is yes or no is by inverting the order of the subject and the verb. Okay, so Antonio habla español. This is the subject, this is the verb. Habla Antonio español. Habla Antonio español. It's the same thing as Antonio habla español. The same thing. So either way is fine, is correct, okay? By just adding the question marks to the statement or reversing the order of the subject and the verb. Habla Antonio español. Okay, so how do you answer yes or no questions? Well, of course, with yes or no. Habla Antonio español? Sí. Antonio, we don't need to say Antonio here because we know what we're talking about. Sí, habla español. Or we can say sí, él habla español. Si habla is conjugated for él, meaning Antonio. Or you can say no, no habla español. Okay, so we have two no's because one is the no from here, okay, and the other one is the one that the one that is putting the verb into the negative. He does not speak. Okay, when you want to make a statement negative, all you have to do is add the word no in front of the verb. Okay, before the verb. We never put the word no after the verb. Okay, so no habla español. Okay, so very good. That is very simple. But now we have a bunch of other questions that whose answers are not yes or no. Okay, so to form these questions, we have to begin with an interrogative word like who, where, why, when, at what time. Okay, so this is a list of question words that you can use to form a question. Okay, so notice that all question words have accents. Okay, all of them. All right. Interrogative words and also exclamatory words all have accents. Okay, que as in que bueno, that's an exclamation, or que, it's a question. They have accents. Okay, so que means what? ¿Qué idioma habla Antonio? ¿Qué idioma habla Antonio? What language does Antonio speak? So we can answer Antonio habla español. Or Antonio habla español inglés. Okay. ¿Por qué? Why? ¿Por qué? And it's two words. ¿Por qué no trabaja Antonio? Why doesn't Antonio work? ¿Por qué no trabaja Antonio? ¿Cómo? How? ¿Cómo está Antonio? ¿Cómo está Antonio? How is Antonio? ¿Cuándo? Means when. ¿Cuándo es la clase? ¿A dónde? Means to where. Okay, ¿a dónde va Antonio? Where is Antonio going? To where? Okay. ¿Dónde? Just dónde means just plain where, as in location. ¿Dónde vive Antonio? Where does Antonio live? ¿De dónde? From where? ¿De dónde regresa Antonio? Where is Antonio coming back from? Or you can think you learned this question when we covered nationalities. ¿De dónde eres? ¿De dónde eres? Where are you from? Yo soy de Argentina, o yo soy argentino. ¿Cuánto o cuánta means how much? Okay. ¿Cuánto estudia Antonio para la clase? ¿Cuánto estudia Antonio para la clase? Okay. And ¿cuántos o cuántas? How many? Depending on whether what if you're talking about something feminine or masculine or singular or plural. ¿Cuántos idiomas? Idiomas it's another one of those words that comes from the Greek, the end in ma, that it's masculine, so we're going to use the masculine form and plural. ¿Cuántos idiomas habla Antonio? ¿Cuántos idiomas habla Antonio? ¿Cuál means which one or which? ¿Cuál es su clase favorita? ¿Cuál es su clase favorita? ¿Cuáles means which ones? ¿Cuáles son sus clases favoritas? ¿Quién habla 5 idiomas? ¿Y quiénes? The plural. ¿Quiénes hablan 5 idiomas? Okay. ¿Quiénes we use when you know for a fact that the answer is going to be in the plural? Okay. So you ask quiénes. If you don't know if the answer is going to be in the plural, ellos or él, or in the singular, you ask with quién. All right. Okay. So numbers from 100 to 1,000. Okay, so we covered up to 100, 100. Okay, so when you go above 100, 101, 102, 116, okay, the word 100 has to become ciento. Okay, just the number 100 is 100, but when you count above 100, it's going to be 101. 102, 103, 104, etc. 116, 120, okay? All of the 100s from 101 to 199 is going to be ciento. And you already know the numbers from 1 to 99. So you know you can say 126, 126, 138, 100, okay, ciento plus the numbers that you already know, okay? All right, so doscientos, see the word dos in there? Dos and then cientos, doscientos, S-C, doscientos. And the word is going to stay the same. 201, 202, 203, 204, 205. And the same thing is going to happen with trescientos. See the word tres and then cientos. 200 is very easy because you have the word dos and then cientos, okay, in the plural. 300. But not here, okay, because cuatro doesn't end in an S, okay? So 400. 400. Be very careful with 500, okay, because it doesn't have the word cinco in it. It's 500. 500. 500. 6 ends with an S, so it's going to be the word seis plus cientos. Be very careful with 700 because it's not siete, it's 700. 700. 800. 900. It's not 900, it's 900. And 1000. Very short little word, okay? 1000. That means 1000. And with 1000, we whatever we add after 1000, you already know all those numbers. Okay, so we're going to say 1001, 1002, 1003, 1101. Okay, 1101. 1200, 1200. 1300, 1900. 1116, okay? 1000 plus the numbers that you already know, okay? Very good. So this is here what I just explained to you. So read that, okay? So it says multiples of cientos agree in number and gender with nouns that they modify, okay? For example, 200 estudiantes, okay, that would be in the masculine or neutral. 300 jóvenes, okay, if jóvenes are girls, we're going to say 300, okay. Now also notice something very important that in Spanish-speaking countries and in most of the world, we use the decimal point instead of a comma to mark thousands, okay? The decimal point, we use a point instead of a comma to mark thousands, okay? And the comma is used to mark decimals, okay? So it's the other way around, okay? Muy bien. So you have activities to practice with numbers, okay? So here, for example, it would be 325, okay? The numbers that you already know. 110, okay? 822, okay? So you're going to put them all together now, all right? Very good. Now at the end of this section that you have completed up to now, you can look at this list and see how you're doing and see if there's anything that you need to review and or need help with, and write down your questions for when we have our conferences, and so you can ask, okay? Muy bien. Hasta la próxima. Adiós. Yesterday we covered how to create questions and numbers, and today we are going to continue with more vocabulary. The vocabulary section number 2, vocabulario comunicación 2, en la universidad. Okay, en la universidad. We're going to talk about university places and objects, and these are things that are very familiar to you. So you can be thinking about the places, the buildings in your university, and making associations like that, and it will make a lot more sense, okay? So, los lugares around campus, okay, the places, los lugares, los lugares. We have some new vocabulary here, okay? So we have el cuarto, the room or the dorm room. Cuarto means just room, okay? And el cuarto está en la residencia. The residencia is the dorm, the dorm, okay, the residency of the students. Okay, so la residencia, la residencia, el estadio, the stadium, el estadio, el gimnasio, the gym, la librería, and librería does not mean library, okay? Librería means bookstore. Biblioteca means library, okay? So don't get confused. Biblioteca, library, and librería, bookstore, okay? Y el centro estudiantil, the student center, el centro estudiantil, la cafetería, cafeteria, okay? All right, so here you have more useful words. El apartamento, the apartment, el apartamento, el edificio, the building, el laboratorio, the lab, y la tienda, the store. Any store, we can call it la tienda, okay? Muy bien. Now, inside a dorm, we can talk about, see, la televisión. Remember the words that end in ción. La televisión, el reloj, and be thinking about how to make them in the plural, and some of them how to make them in this, into feminine. If they're feminine, how to make them into the masculine, because that all nouns have gender and number. So la televisión ends with an N, so how are you going to make it plural? Televisiones, okay? So be thinking about when you learn new nouns, you need to keep in mind that they will have gender and number, okay? So singular and plural, masculine or feminine, okay? So el reloj, the clock, la televisión, el DVD, el dinero, the money, el dinero, la calculadora, los discos compactos, or we also say los CD o los CD, la computadora, el radio o la radio. Here it says in this note that el radio is the actual, the physical thing, okay? And la radio is the broadcast. El despertador, the alarm clock. El despertador. Y this is a girl, so we're going to call her la compañera de cuarto. La compañera de cuarto. If it were two guys, and if this was a guy, we would say el compañero de cuarto. Okay? We have vocabulary there, or like here. El compañero de cuarto is a male roommate. El horario de clases is the schedule of classes. El horario, H is silent. El reproductor de CD o de DVD, the CD or DVD player. Reproductor. Okay? So that is your new vocabulary for today. So you're going to practice some with vocabulary to become familiar with it. Okay? So for example, see, the verbs are all coming back. So you're going to, for example, read these actions. Okay, for example, leer libros, estudiar, and you can think about where, in what place you do this action. Okay, leer libros or estudiar, that would be in the library, right? La biblioteca. So where would you perform these actions? Comer pasta y tomar café, and you can name the place. Comprar libros. Okay, so the verbs are coming back, so you need to know, number one, what they mean, and number two, how to conjugate them. But in this case, we're just going to leave them in the infinitive because we're just talking about the action itself, not somebody specific doing them. Just think about where you would perform these actions to practice the vocabulary that you just learned, okay? Here, you also, for example, can think about what items you have in your dorm room. So you're going to use, again, the verb to have, the verb tener. ¿ok? Por ejemplo, tengo una calculadora, una computadora, o no tengo un radio, un reproductor. So see, everything starts coming together. What do I have? What do I not have in the dorm room? So you use the verb to have, okay? And here the questions are coming back. When you meet new people in college, you ask a lot of questions, right? Especially if you have a roommate that you had never met before. So you ask a lot of questions. So you need to you can practice, asking questions like you learned yesterday. De dónde eres? Where are you from? ¿Qué estudias? ¿Dónde estudias? And asking the questions and answering them with the verb conjugated for yourself, for the first person, for yo. Okay. Por ejemplo, ¿dónde o qué estudias? Estudio español. O ¿dónde compras tus libros? Yo compro mis libros en la librería, etc. Okay, so practice with those questions and those verbs and the vocabulary. Okay, muy bien. So now we're going to go to the verb estar. Estar. The verb estar also expresses to be, just like the verb ser that we already learned. Okay, we learned the verb ser, and now we're going to learn the verb estar, and they both mean to be, both of them. They are not interchangeable. Okay, so if you use one, it means one thing. If you use the other one, it means a different thing. So they're not interchangeable. So we need to learn what the difference is between them. Okay, you already know ser, yo soy, tú eres, él es, and we use ser to describe people, but to describe their more permanent traits, for example, personality or physical traits, things that are not going to change anytime soon. For example, if somebody is tall, that's not going to change tomorrow, okay? So it's rather permanent. So to describe personality or physical traits that describe, that identify a person, we use ser. For estar, we can use the verb estar to describe someone, but only to describe the state of being at the moment, okay? For example, I say, I am tired. I'm going to say, estoy cansada. When I ask you questions when we do the conferences, I always start with, ¿cómo estás? And some of you say, estoy muy bien. ¿Cómo estás tú? Okay, so how are you? How are you at the moment? So we use the verb estar. They both mean to be, but they're not used interchangeably. Okay? Estar, like the other two verbs that we learned, tener y ser, are not regular, like we learned earlier this week. So that means that you can't just drop the ar ending and add the usual ar endings. This is an irregular verb, so you're going to have to learn how it's conjugated. Okay, yo estoy, tú estás, ¿cómo estás? Estoy bien. Usted, él, ella está. Nosotros, nosotras estamos. Vosotros, vosotras estáis. Ustedes, ellos y ellas están. Okay? So that's a conjugation of the verb estar. Ser and estar are not interchangeable. They are used differently. So two very common uses of the verb estar to describe the location of someone or something. Every time you're talking about where someone or something is, the location is going to be the verb ser. The verb estar. Manuel está en la sala de clase. So Manuel is in the classroom. That is the location. Nuestros padres están en México. Our parents are in Mexico, the location. Or for example, you can say Spain is in Europe. España está en Europa. España está en Europa. See? Every time we talk about location, estar. And then to describe how someone is feeling or to express a change from the norm. Estoy bien, ¿y tú? Estamos tristes hoy. We are sad today, all right? Estamos tristes, see? Now, if you use the verb ser with an adjective that communicates something that can change, you what you are meaning is that that person is sad all the time. If you say somos tristes without oy, right? Somos tristes, you're saying that we are sad all the time, that is what defines us, that we are sad people. Okay, so that's why we use the verb estar to describe something that can change. It's something that is a change from the norm, something that is not quite as permanent as a physical trait. Okay, very good. So you're going to practice with using the different conjugations of estar, all right? And you have different activities in my Spanish lab. Um, Review this section that talks about the verb estar and when it's used and how to conjugate it, and do the activities, okay? Like I said, for geography, when you talk about where something is, where a city is, for example, Washington, ¿dónde está Washington, D.C.? ¿Dónde está? Where is it? ¿Dónde está? You already know the question word. ¿Dónde está? Washington, D.C. está en los Estados Unidos. All right, so when you talk about different places in the world, location, you're going to use the verb estar. Por ejemplo, ¿dónde está La Habana? La Habana está en Cuba, ¿sí? ¿Dónde está Buenos Aires? Buenos Aires está en Argentina. Okay, so to talk about location, the verb estar, not the verb ser. And another use for the verb estar is to talk about emotions and states of being. Okay, these are things that can change from one moment to another, from one day to another, or from one week to another. Okay, for example, I had never seen that word before. Chema y Gloria. Chema y Gloria están aburridos. Chema está aburrido. Gloria está aburrida. ¿Ok? Roberto está cansado. Mayra está cansada. Okay, this means bored. This means tired. Ellos están cansados. Okay, plural. Samuel está contento. He's happy. Y Tina está contenta. Ellos están contentos. Because it's two of them. Rui está enfermo. He's sick. Y Carmen está enferma. Ellos, Rui y Carmen, están enfermos. Memo está enojado, angry. Y Eva está enojada. Memo y Eva están enojados. Nervous. Carlos está nervioso. Patricia está nerviosa. Carlos y Patricia están nerviosos. Ramón está preocupado, worried. Raquel está preocupada. Ramón y Raquel, los dos, están preocupados. Fernando está triste, sad. Silvia está triste. Notice that it ends in an E, so we use the same adjective for both. Fernando y Silvia están tristes. Okay, so feliz, happy. All right. Remember how to make the adjectives that end in a Z plural. Remember how to do that. We have to change the Z for a C and then add ES. So, Carlos está feliz. Rebeca está feliz. Carlos y Rebeca están felices. Okay, felices. In Spanish, there is no such thing as adding an S right after a consonant. Okay, so if a word ends in a Z and you need to make it into the plural, you have to add ES, not just S. Okay, very good. So you're going to practice with emotions and states of being and the verb estar. Okay, let me see what's next. Okay, so that is it for today, and tomorrow we're going to finish the chapter with, we're going to go back to el verbo gustar, the verb gustar a little bit, because we're going to use it, we're going to learn another use of the verb gustar, okay? So, muy bien, do all your work, and I will get back to you tomorrow, okay? Hasta mañana. Today we're going to finish the chapter, el capítulo 2, and we have been looking at different vocabulary to talk about academic life, to describe people and places and objects. And yesterday you learned the uses of the verb estar. And so today we're going to finish up by looking at the verb gustar, which you already looked at in the very first chapter when we talked about what you like to do and what you don't like to do, conveying likes and dislikes. Okay, so you learned, let me make this a little bigger here. You learned that to talk about something that you like that is in the singular form, you say me gusta, okay? Me gusta la profesora. If you want to make that sentence negative, you're going to put the word no in front of me. Okay, no me gusta, no me gusta. Me gusta is for to talk about myself. Okay, so I like the professor, or I don't like the professor. If you're talking about something that is in the plural form, like clases de idiomas, language classes, you're going to say me gustan las clases de idiomas. I like language classes, all right? To ask somebody in the second person, you have to ask with the form te gustan, because this is for tú, okay? This is a pronoun for do you like. ¿Te gustan las novelas de Sandra Cisneros? Do you like Sandra Cisneros' novels? It's plural because it's las novelas. Or ¿te gusta el arte abstracto? Okay? And then if I'm talking about somebody else in the third person, about him or her, okay, I'm going to use a pronoun le, okay? No le gusta estudiar. He does not like to study. No le. So me gusta, te gustan, and le gusta. Okay, and later on in another chapter, I'm not sure if it's in 111 or 112, I can't remember, you're going to learn the other pronouns, okay? So this is for yo, this is for tú, and this is for he or she or usted. See? Okay, muy bien. Now, you see that here we have the expression le gusta with an infinitive verb, estudiar. So that is another way that you can use the expression me gusta or no me gusta. Okay, you can talk about something that you don't like, an object or a person, or you can talk about an activity that you don't like. If you're talking about an activity that you don't like, we're going to use the infinitive. No le gusta estudiar. And the verb gustar is always going to be gusta, not gustan, okay? Even if you're talking about multiple activities, okay? No le gusta estudiar, cantar, comer, okay? It doesn't matter how many activities, the verb is going to be gusta. See? Okay. Muy bien. So, with that, let me move that. We're going to go to página 81. And then we can also talk about sports and pastimes and offer your opinions. Do you like doing these things, these sports or these activities or these pastimes? And here we have some more verbs, and they are all in the infinitive form. Okay? Bailar, to dance. Caminar, to walk. Escuchar música, listen to music. And remember, you can in your ebook you can click on the highlighted words and you can hear how these words are pronounced. Ir de compras, to go shopping. Ir de compras. Jugar al básquetbol, play basketball. Jugar al básquetbol. Jugar al béisbol. Okay, jugar. And then we have more on the next page, página 82. Jugar al fútbol. Jugar al fútbol americano. Okay, fútbol americano is football, and fútbol is soccer. Jugar al golf. Montar en bicicleta. Montar en bicicleta, to ride a bike. Jugar al tenis, play tennis. Nadar, to swim. Ver la televisión, ver la televisión. Patinar, to skate. Tocar un instrumento, to play an instrument. Tocar el piano, tocar la flauta, whatever. Tomar el sol, to lie in the sun or to sunbathe. Tomar el sol. Tomar el sol. So these are all verbs that are in the infinitive, and when you use them with the expression me gusta or no me gusta, you're going to use the infinitive. You can say me gusta mucho nadar, o no me gusta jugar al fútbol americano. Me gusta ver la televisión, no me gusta patinar. Okay? And here you have a few other words that can be useful. El equipo. You can talk about what team you like. Me gusta el equipo, and you name the team. Me gusta hacer ejercicio, to exercise. La pelota, the ball. Okay, so more vocabulary there. And then you have more activities. And here you can put a lot of things that you have learned together. You can talk about what you like, in what month or in what season, with whom, where, how much you like it. Okay, so see how everything's coming together. You can start making very complete sentences with what you already know in only 2 chapters. Okay, so or 3 chapters actually. So try to use as much as you possibly can of what you have learned, because that's the only way that you're going to remember all these terms and all these verbs. Okay, so this is all for this chapter. You are going to have an activity about sports in the Hispanic world. Los deportes en el mundo hispano. Sports are a very, very big part of of life in the Hispanic world, in a little, maybe a little different way than in the United States, but a very big part of people's lives. Okay, and next week we're going to start Capitulo 3, and Capitulo 3 is about the house, describing the different parts of the house, and talking about chores. You know what you do around the house, household chores. We're going to do colors. We're going to start working some with irregular verbs, okay? And we're going to add more numbers, okay? So I will see you next week then. Hasta la semana que viene. Adiós. Buen fin de semana.